Hi, I'm Max, and that's Sybe from the Triple S League. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Well, really only two stories, but just one of them, you're on the internet at all and you consider yourself a gamer, you probably heard about, and it's pretty huge, so we're just going to dive right into it. Activision Blizzard, Sybe. We've talked a lot about them on this show. Sybe, you've certainly talked a lot about them on your show, on your channel. It seems that for the past several years, they've somehow managed to become more and more evil, like getting upwards of I personally consider the two worst gaming companies to be EA and Konami, but Activision Blizzard are getting right up there real fast. Just when you think things can't get any worse with them, they somehow do. Let's just run down the list of terrible things they've done real quick, shall we? They're responsible for the introduction of loot box monetization into gaming. Thank you, Overwatch. They demonstrated their complete ignorance when it came to what their audience wants when they announced Diablo Immortal exclusively for mobile, rather than Diablo 4 for PC, which they only did after the backlash. There was the release of Warcraft 3 Reforged, which was an absolute critical failure. I think at one point it became like the most downvoted game ever on Metacritic. Certainly one of the most downvoted. They completely bent their knee to the Chinese Communist Party when they screwed over Blitzchung for supporting the Hong Kong democracy protesters. Oh, and let's not forget the fact that Bobby Kotick, the CEO of Blizzard, is paying himself $200 million this year, while laying off several employees and paying many of those who remain minimum wage. So, people have gotten pretty sick and tired of Activision Blizzard for these reasons, and more, the last little while. So much so that some reports say that for the first time in a long time, World of Warcraft might not be the MMO juggernaut that it used to be. Like you mentioned last week, Sybe, like tons and tons of people are making a point to leave World of Warcraft behind and move over to Final Fantasy XIV. So many that it might have more active subscribers than World of Warcraft. If we're going by the statistics from MMO Population, the website, Final Fantasy XIV currently has 2.49 million active players, versus World of Warcraft, which has 2.19 million. That's nuts, because for as long as I think I've pretty much had consciousness, World of Warcraft has been the king. And it's weird for like this era to seem like it's coming to an end. But with that information and all the previous controversies in mind, you'd have to think there's no way it can get any worse, right? Just no way. Well, piece of news came out 2 days ago. We're recording this on Friday. And I think it's fair to say that things have gone right past worse and went right to worst. Like the worst. I'm talking people doing the worst possible things to each other and getting away with it. Sybe, this news report that I'm referring to, that you sent to me yesterday, came out on Wednesday from Bloomberg, and it's bad. Like, yeah, really bad.
It's really bad, and they dance around some of the stuff, and they don't call out some stuff like they should, I think. The worst thing is somebody died, okay? So we need to be real clear on this, and Blizzard should have been extremely clear on this. I'm even upset that Bloomberg and some of these other sources, they're not as clear on this as they could. The only person who seems to have kind of like hammered this home to the point as far as like the big voices go is Asmongold, and even then he's only kind of like skiffing it. Somebody committed suicide allegedly over the things going on. But that's the thing. Is that, oh, well, it's allegedly connected. That's the word they're throwing around. No, it is connected. It 100% is connected. And I could say that 100% matter-of-factly when you look at it like this. And that is, did somebody work at Blizzard and then commit suicide whilst working at Blizzard?
Yeah.
If the answer is yes, then there is some correlation there. Now, we don't know if the correlation is 0.01% of it. Is it a fraction of a fraction? Was that the amount of the influence going on there? Or was it 99%? So the fact that Blizzard just uses this, and they did it in the most disrespectful, disgusting way possible. It's like, how dare you bring this person into the thing? No, dude, no.
How dare you?
No, how dare you flash this off like it was nothing? When somebody is under your care, which an employee is, they do their actions have some connection to you, whether in small or in large. We don't know which one it was. We can't make a statement regarding that. Was it 50%, 100%, 5%, 2%, 75%? We don't know any of those things. But it wasn't zero. Because the fact that they worked there, the fact that they apparently, again, I'm quoting the sources that the legal stuff that's been brought forward on this, they committed suicide while on a work trip with a team leader, so somebody in authority over them, who they were sleeping with, and who had brought several. I mean, I don't want to get too graphic here, but if you read the suit, they brought certain things with them that you only, employ in the company of a significant other and or, bed partner.
Yeah.
That's not nothing. And in fact, if that was if it was a, I'm trying to be as delicate as I can with this.
Yeah, yeah.
If it was a scenario in which it was a scenario that the police were involved, and it was a scenario that they questioned a lot of people in that process, and they discovered some pretty disgusting things about the team leader that was there. Now, again, how much of a victim they were versus a cause or causation, that's not necessarily figured out. But it's not nothing. Like Blizzard passes it off to be, oh, well, she was just having some issues. And it's like, okay, well, how many of those were your responsibility? Because as someone who did spend numerous times staring down a barrel of a gun when I was at my worst, deciding whether or not to pull the trigger, I can tell you most assuredly that if I had a bad day at work, it became a whole lot more tempting than if I didn't have a bad day at work.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those bad days of work were not my fault. They were the fault of supervisors and other people who were literally just blowing off steam by stepping on somebody who is lower than them in the seniority bracket. Now, again, how much of that is involved? It's not nothing, Blizzard.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, but I think we can safely say that there is a genuine reason to be suspect, because the article that we both read from Bloomberg, it says that the allegations that are being made against Activision Blizzard by the state of California are pretty well substantiated, because it's the result of a 2-year investigation into what's been going on there. And the thing that you're speaking of an employee committing suicide, that is apparently the result of the overall culture that has been instantiated, at least at the offices within California of Activision Blizzard. And according to the Bloomberg article, it's a quote-unquote frat boy culture, and there's much more to it. Like, this is obviously the worst, where somebody takes their own life as a result of this type of culture and the way that they were treating her, where we won't get into the most graphic details, but yeah, there's plenty more where that came from. So what else was there said?
So there was a lot of things that had some pay discrepancies between men and women. This kind of stuff is where the legalese will kind of get really thick and heavy, and your eyes might glaze over when trying to understand, what exactly is going on. Hogue Law did a big breakdown on this, trying to look at it from very much a lawyer's perspective. So he was doing so without very much effort in it. And to be candid, he does have a family member, I believe it's his son, who currently works for Activision. So there is, he did make that clear at the beginning. The way that he bridged a lot of the stuff, I think it would have been better if he had passed that off to Viva Dirt or one of the other YouTube lawyers to kind of talk through it a little bit. I think that when your son works for a company that you're reporting about, it's going to be difficult to. Yeah, there is a conflict of interest there. And I don't care how skilled you are. When you have that big of a conflict of interest, then it's something that you should step aside on. And as somebody in his position within the community, I think he probably should have done that, because he put it into a fair, I know it's his job, but he did sugarcoat certain things or make things look or appear as it's really that's just going to come down to the lawyers debating the merits of this and that. And it's okay, I get that you're doing the lawyer speak now, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. So the legalese of it, it's of course everybody deserves their day in court, and some people were upset by this. There's a couple, more than one person who was upset when I said everybody deserves a day in court. But you don't understand. The worst thing for some of these people who acted in these ways, is to stand in front of a court that proceedings are being broadcast to the world and have the reality of what they did shoved in their face, and then they not being able to explain why they did so, because it's unexcusable. And then for them to walk out with that shame, that is one of the greatest punishments you can dish somebody, as well as the actual punishment to follow, right? So I don't see why. And I made a Twitter post that I believe that there should be a manslaughter charge in here somewhere.
Yeah.
Because you can drive a person to suicide, and that is not their fault. That is somebody who's acting with great maliciousness and who may not necessarily intend that to happen, but their actions, made it to happen. And I think that's something that should be looked at a little bit more frequently. And I'm a bit harsh on this because again, I've struggled with this myself, and it's something that is kind of close to the chest on this. So I think that it's pretty bad for them to bridge it that way. But beyond the pay differences, which again, there is some explanation for it if you're looking at particular things which Hoglaw pointed out, one being that none of the people were actually holding those very high up positions that did pay, that much. Like Bobby giving himself 200 million. There's only one of those positions in the company. So yeah, you can't quite take a comparison of somebody who was close to like a leadership position within the company and then compare it to the guy who runs the company, right? Like there is some difference there, obviously, but that is going to be one of the things that they're really going to get into the heavy. And of course, because they are the essentially the prosecutor side, they're going to put some of these charges on thick and heavy to force Blizzard into trying to negotiate a settlement right away because of things. And when we get close to the end, I'll explain what I think the outcome of this is going to be.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there was a lot of abuse in the form of rough housing in the way of they did these cubicle crawls. So it's kind of like a bar crawl where you go from one bar to the next, just drinking really heavily, and then you just go to the next. And it's kind of, I've never done one of those. I don't drink at all, but it's really bizarre to me. Like I can't wrap my head around the idea of just like getting smashed and then just wandering around the city.
And
it's
like an idiot in front of loads of people.
yeah, it's something that I just don't understand. But they would get, apparently, and again, a lot of this stuff is allegedly there'd be people that would get hammered, guys, and then they would go and crawl around between the cubicles. And now, so this isn't what was made clear. Were there women in these cubicles or not? Because if there were women in these cubicles and they were trying to work, and if they were wearing a skirt or a dress, that is what we call, I don't know if we can actually say it on YouTube, but that is an actual legal crime in many countries.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, if you carry around a selfie stick and you keep it low to the ground and you take pictures with the camera facing up on people walking around in skirts and dresses, you can go to jail real fast, and you deserve to be so. And frankly, I think that's where they should bring back the stocks. You put somebody in stocks in the city square, and then people throw rotten food at them for a couple of weeks. Yeah, that'll smarten somebody up on that fairly quickly, I think. Again, I'm sorry, I'm being a little aggressive here.
Well,
but that's but again, that's not actually detailed whether or not women were actually involved in this, or whether or not this was done after night and it was just or during business hours in empty cubicles and it was just a game that was being played. And so Asmongold, for example, said that sounded like fun. Now that sounded like fun, I think, in his way of thinking that's what they were doing, is they were crawling from empty cubicle to empty cubicle, doing like a drinking game, which again, if you're into that sort of thing, that sounds like fun. But the minute that you add women in dresses trying to do their work whilst you're doing this, you enter in the situation for a lot of abuse to happen very, very quickly. Was there groping involved? Did you get extra points if you did that? What kind of other degenerate things were they doing? Or was it just that? And so that's one of the things that we have to be a little just, right, in stating that we don't know how many of these bad things were connected in the way that they were connected. Mm-hmm. There were a bunch of other examples, some more individual examples. One of the examples that disgusted me the most, because I have a lot of younger siblings, and I remember my mother having to deal with this from time to time, and that is trying to breastfeed a child whilst disgusting, creepy, vile, lecherous old men are trying to get a peekaboo on a woman breastfeeding a child. Yeah. And I've seen some pretty, like, my mom did not take that stuff. Like my mom is not somebody you push around like that. And I remember that some events when I was younger where, she was like, "Get out of here, you creep. What are you doing?" And so what was going on in this particular case is that there were lactation rooms set up for nursing mothers to either nurse directly, or in some cases, some of the women, they pump themselves into a container, they put the container in the fridge, then they take that home, and then that is used to feed the baby the next day.
Yeah.
That is a very common practice and a very healthy practice because baby formula doesn't give the enzymes and the antibiotics that natural breast milk does. And I think every mother who does that should be congratulated and should be, put on a pedestal of doing the best for their child that they can. And that is a well-respected thing for them to do. But apparently, some men would just barge into the room, which is set up as a lactation room, and say, "Oh yeah, we need this place for a meeting. I gotta move some of these chairs around." I've seen this before in lecherous, disgusting pigs, and I know it's a problem in a lot of places, not just in Silicon Valley. This is a very common problem that nursing mothers have to deal with, and it's disgusting. So I can see that this is like the fact that they bring this up. I think this one's legit because I know I have seen it before. I have seen people who are like, "I need to find some excuse to enter that room where that girl's topless right now." It's like, no, you don't, you pig. You don't. That's rude. That's disgusting. That's
You're more likely to do stupid crap like that when you're under the influence.
Exactly. So how does that factor into things? But anyway, that was one of the ones that really, really peeved me. There were some other ones that can likely be proven if they get to exploratory phase. So like looking at their emails and going through their emails, which again, I'm going to explain why Blizzard does not want to have this happen at all. But it's absolutely 100% disgusting. And yeah, the charges are long and heavy and pretty messed up. You can read it yourself. A lot of these are very, very terrible. There's some that get worse than that. There's some that are a little bit more tame. And it's been going on for a long time. And I have started to dig around, started to talk to people. And one of the biggest things that I think you'll hear and that you'll see is that so many female game devs are shrugging their shoulders and saying it's always been like this.
Yeah.
And that's the worst part, is that it's, for a lot of women, this is the norm of what they have to deal with. And it's not the norm for all guys to do this. I really want to point this out, and because some people have been really upset and some people get a little angry, myself included. There's some people like, oh, all men are like this. No, I think I was really kind of puzzling it through my head. And I think there's an equal percentage of guys who will stand up against this kind of stuff that also do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think there's a small chunk of men who will absolutely never let this happen. They are because they have mothers, sisters, wives, daughters, and they will never let this happen. I remember as a kid watching one boy tried to take a peek into the girl's shower room, and one of the dads of one of the girls, he came over and he dragged the kid by his ear out of that bathroom, and he gave him one of the most stern talking tos I have ever seen. Yeah, and it scared the ever-living crap out of the kid. The kid was about 9-ish, and I mean, dragging people by their ears, that used to be a lot more common when I was young. So this isn't like something that happened yesterday. This is something that happened when I was very young, which was a couple thousand years ago at this point.
Hey man,
but
if I ever had a kid and I caught him doing that, I'd instill the fear of God in
yeah,
him.
Well, it wasn't his kid though, but he was stark. He was like, if you ever try and peek on a girl again, there will be hell to pay. And you knew it too. So I want to point out that there is a lot of guys who stand absolutely against this, and they're not going to be engaging in this activity at all. Then there's a portion of guys who do this, and they seem to have like this sub code with other guys who are willing to do this. Preach, one of these big YouTubers, was talking about this, and I think I agree with them. I have never had guys say, "Hey, do you want to talk about your latest sexual exploitations?" Which also something that was insinuated in this article, that guys would regularly get together and just talk about this. I have never had that conversation with another man. I have only ever had that conversation with the person that I'm actually like currently in a committed relationship with. I don't understand how guys could just walk around and be like, "Hey, want to talk about how to, like." I just don't get it. Yeah. I don't understand. I have no idea, no conception of why they would find that interesting to brag about. And there was some really bad stuff. Some of the stuff that's been coming out recently now, because more and more devs are speaking up, is there was a couple that were working at Blizzard, and they would come up to the guy and be like, "Hey, you want to, we should all get into a foursome or a threesome or something like that." And they started being aggressive towards him because he wouldn't say yes. That's sexual assault too. So what I think there is I think there's another majority. I think it is the majority of guys who don't notice these things, who don't really talk about these things, and in some cases don't believe that these things happen on a regular basis. And they kind of shrug their shoulders and say, nah, nah, and if they're around the good guys, then they kind of lean more towards those good guys. But if they're around all those bad guys, they tend to let them pass a lot. And I think that's what we were seeing here, because there clearly wasn't very many people, walking up to these guys saying, don't you dare do that. Men or women. I don't think there was either of them routinely getting in people's faces saying, don't you dare do that again. I am going to go down to the police department and report you for sexual harassment. I'm skipping the whole HR department. I am making a legal complaint right now because what you did is illegal. How dare you, sir? How dare you? I don't think there's enough of that going on.
Yeah, well, it's just because it's vastly easier to just not get involved. And when stuff like this happens, it's just a lot less stress on the mind, and it's just easier to pay people off. Like, that's what we've seen in regards to the Ubisoft stuff, with similar stuff. Probably not to the same great extent that we're seeing it here with Activision Blizzard, but, it's bad enough. They said, oh yeah, we're committed to inclusion and diversity, which, by the way, whenever a corporation says that, they're lying to your face, especially these particular companies. What
do they do when it comes down to LGBT acceptance, right? They wave their flags, they put their things up on their Twitters and that, and they're like, hey, look at how awesome we are. And then you look at those same wings of those companies in Saudi Arabia or some other country in the Middle East where that is not actually accepted at all.
Right. Yeah.
In China too, especially. And you say, oh yeah, what about here? Oh, look, you guys didn't mention a word about this at all. Not at all. Wow.
Yeah. How do you feel about the way that the Chinese treat ethnic minorities in their country, Blizzard?
Mm-hmm. Right. They don't speak a word about that, but they're in their defense letter. They're like, oh yeah, we're accepting. We're looking out. We're putting people that have there are all kinds of different races, and that's not the issue. The issue is that you have a bunch of disgusting people that work for you, and you've been validating and okaying the behavior for apparently years. And that's what's not good. Anyways, I know we're short on time. I'm going to be talking more about this tomorrow on our podcast tomorrow. Mm-hmm. I have received some news and some information that is also pretty startling. It's about as bad or a little worse than a lot of this. It's not as bad, obviously, as this. I'm going to be talking about it, so tune in tomorrow. I think does this go up before or after we do our podcast in the day?
It goes up tomorrow on Saturday. So unfortunately, I imagine
it'll be Saturday morning for us. So if you're listening to this, check out our Triple S League. Check out our Saturday morning show. We're gonna cover the stuff, and I'm gonna mention this a little bit. I'll give kind of a tease to it since it'll probably be out there. It appears as that there was more nefarious reasons for Bobby Kotick to lay off an enormous amount of people and then immediately rehire a bunch of them for, in some cases, less than they were making beforehand. But apparently there's some shenanigans going on here that makes this whole situation look a lot worse.
Yeah, I don't doubt that there's more to this story. Like, we're just in the first days of this. This is going to be this whole thing, we're going to be hearing about this for the next few months, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's the worst controvery of 2021 when it comes to gaming.
I think they're going to settle on this. They can't afford the bad news, and more than the bad news that's currently going on, they cannot in any way allow the state to look at their records, to look at their emails, because if they do that, they're going to open up a whole can of worms. Because if you've deleted emails in that scenario, they could infer a lot on those deleted emails. If you didn't delete the emails and you have even just a small bit of stuff that confirms any of this stuff, they are going to be crucified.
Yep. Quite
literally. And if there's worse things that come out by this, such as the information that I seem to have discovered myself getting my hands on, if any of that turns out to be true, I don't think there will be an Activision Blizzard left after the court proceedings follow. I think that if this happens, again, powerful people tend to avoid punishment, but if this goes the way that I'm hearing, and if this gets to court, which is why I think they're going to settle, there wouldn't be an Activision left.
Yeah.
The bulk of the leadership will be in prison again if this stuff pans out to be true, and this is going to shake things up. And again, they have nobody to blame but themselves.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I imagine that, like you said, they have the money to settle. Even though they have been laying people off, they have been having record profits. And I
Yep.
imagine, they buy up all the best lawyers and take care of it that way. But here's hoping that proper justice will be done, and that justice will result in better practices, not just within the companies like these occupy, but also just in regards to the development of gaming in general. So before we move on to the second and last story that we have, which I promise will be a lot more positive, I did have one last question I wanted to ask you. As somebody who has played World of Warcraft a long period of time, a long history with Blizzard games, how does this make you feel as somebody who's played that game for a long time, and do you imagine you'll be able to go back and play it after hearing stuff like this?
It depends on their response. I mean, this is what a lot of people are saying. It depends on their response. It depends on the stuff. It depends on how many of these people were involved in this. Do you want to sink a ship that has with 1,000 people on it that happens to have 5 pirates on it?
Yeah.
Like, is that the response? Are you going to victimize the victims over again by doing this? Like, are you going to make all those people who suffered through this for years? Are you going to give them justice and then continue to support them, or are you going to burn the whole thing down and leave them on the street with absolutely nothing, and then go, "Haha, we've done justice for you"? There are groups of people and organizations that do that, who walk through areas and burn people's houses down, burn people's buildings down, then look at them and say, "Aren't you glad that you've been liberated now?"
Well, no.
And I don't think that's the right case. Now, again, that entirely depends. If there's 500 pirates on a ship and there's only 5 good people on the ship, well, then, I mean, maybe it's kind of like a blast the thing and then try and rescue, and so there's obviously big moral questions, and those two of the biggest extremes that I can think of on either end of the scenario.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of questions to be asked right now. There's currently a sit-in going on for anybody who still has an active WoW account. There's a sit-on going on one of my home servers, actually. There is a big, large community of guildy people that are set up, and they're currently having a sit-in Oribos, talking to each other, protesting where they can. And I think that's a good idea. I think that if you have WoW time left right now and you haven't canceled, then that's probably a good idea. As far as canceling, again, it's one of those things where it's like there's
It's
so
much more
many
complicated,
good
yeah.
people. One of the other great autistic streamers out there, Des Mephisto. WoW
Right.
is entirely how he makes his living right now. Are we going to take that away from him too? Like, those are the very difficult questions that we have to answer right now. And if he does move or he does change games, he's going to lose most of his audience, because that's just the way that Twitch works. When we moved away from projects and products that weren't doing good anymore, we lost the entire momentum on our channel, and it's happened twice.
Yeah.
And it's really, no, sorry, it's happened, yeah, no, just twice, and it's been horrible. It's been really horrible. Sometimes you have to start over again completely, and that sucks. So, and not to mention that sometimes you can't get going on a second try. So there's a lot of really difficult questions and a lot of more difficult answers.
Yeah, that you made a few magnificent points there, Side.
Mhm.
After all, even though I haven't played World of Warcraft as anywhere near as much as you did, I have played a lot of it in my lifetime, and it is one of the best not just games, but game experiences I've ever had. Just being
Mhm.
able to meet with people. I met with people in real life who I played World of Warcraft with, and they're wonderful people. You get to build long-lasting friendships by playing this game, doing these raids, going to the different worlds, riding on dragons, riding on horses, getting all the best loot. It's so much fun, and it would be a real shame if something like that has provided so much joy and entertainment for over a decade to just completely disintegrate and, like you said, just blow everything up. But we'll have to see if something like that will happen. Hopefully not. Hopefully the people who are moral will be able to not be affected by the actions of immoral people in this regard, and people like Des Mephisto and Asmongold and all the other people that have played World of Warcraft and do content around it will be able to continue to do so. But as you said, it's complicated and things will be sorted out over a long period of time. But that's it for today in regards to that story. Obviously, stay tuned. We will provide updates on this. Saib will certainly provide updates on his channel, which you can go and check out by clicking on the link in the description box. And let's move on to the last story, which, as I said, is is a lot more positive. Surprisingly, it's coming out of the aforementioned EA, who I and many other people believe to be the most evil company in terms of gaming. But you got to give the devil its due when they actually do something good. At EA Play, which was yesterday, I believe, it's sort of like the conference that they were kind of supposed to have with E3, I think, but they pushed it a month later. They announced a bunch of things, but, the one thing that is of importance to me and Saib, and, something that people have been begging for a long time, is Dead Space. We've talked on past shows about the possibility of Dead Space being revived, and it seems like all the reports that we were talking about in those past shows are true. Dead Space lives. It's not a sequel. It's a remake of the first game.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really know much else beyond that. They released a 1 minute long trailer just confirming that, hey, Isaac's back. I imagine that there's going to be new and beautiful ways to cut off the limbs of people. But aside from that, we don't really know anything else, I don't think. Saib, your reaction to the revival of Dead Space and what you think we can expect.
Basically what I've talked about before. I think we're going to see a couple of improvements to the story that were in the second game. I hope that we're not going to see loot boxes and purchasable power that we saw in the third game.
No, actually, from what I understand, they released something following the trailer that said there won't be any microtransactions. So good for you.
Well,
good for you, EA.
Again, I wouldn't trust it until 5 years after release.
Right.
Because in Ubisoft's case, they said this game is coming with no microtransactions. Isn't that great, everybody? Yeah. And then 6 months later, they go, and now we're adding microtransactions by popular demand.
Yeah,
it's
I learned my lesson really badly with that when I bought Crash Team Racing. And speaking of Activision, but sorry, go ahead.
Still legally, no in-app purchases for the game on release.
Mm-hmm.
On release, there wasn't any. There is now. There's a ton. You could spend $1,000 in the game in 5 minutes. But when it was released, well, there was nothing in there then. So that's the game. That's the dirty, filthy game that these people play. I think, it boils my blood. It boils my blood.
Yeah. Like, generally speaking, because it is being made by EA Motive, who did give us Star Wars Squadrons, which, from what I understand, still doesn't have any microtransactions in it or paid DLC. I might be wrong about the paid DLC thing. But, it was well received critically and, lower price than most AAA games. I would like to think that because of their status within EA and the respect that they treated that game, that it's in the best possible place that it can be if, it's going to be related to EA whatsoever. So, yeah, I hope that it's more than just like a remaster. I hope that what happens is they will just take the story that we have, but flesh it out, maybe do things with it that they originally wanted to do way back then, but weren't able to for whatever reason. Kind of like I know this isn't the best example, but, there are people that really enjoyed the Final Fantasy VII Remake. They did things with that game that were new because there were certain things in that game that they weren't able to do when it came out for the first time on the PS1. I would like to see them add stuff like that. Maybe, as Saib said, expand the lore in doing stuff like that. And I'd like to see just how many new ways we can tear off the limbs of those alien I can't swear. I was about to quote Sergeant Johnson from Halo, but you know what I mean. Just do what Dead Space 1 and 2 did so well with making it feel so mechanically fine-tuned and satisfying, but do it with updated graphics and mechanics, right? I think that's the best we can hope for. Was there anything else that you can suggest?
No. It's one of these things where it's like I'm tentatively keeping an eye on it.
Mm-hmm.
For anything from EA, I don't actually watch it directly. I very rarely will pay attention to anything directly from EA or from Ubisoft or from these companies. I'll get questions every once in a while by Ash or other people like, did you pay attention to the story? And I'm like, I perused it and then I deleted it from my memory to save storage space. So yes and no, I can't remember anything about it. So,
yeah, that's why I didn't watch the EA State of Play or whatever the hell it's called. I just watched I read about the highlights on the different news sites and watched the different YouTubers' videos. But it's encouraging. I would love to be able to see what they're able to do. And it's probably not going to come out for a while, but I hope that when it does, it's well polished and it can sort of fill that void in my heart for survival horror that, isn't a game called Resident Evil, which, I like Resident Evil, but it's nice to have things switched up. And it's also nice to have a dormant horror franchise being revived and actually having stuff done with it. Konami. Anyways.
Right.
So just a little bit of good news to palate cleanse after that last story. That does it for us, ladies and gentlemen, for this episode of Maximum News. Thank you so much for tuning in. Saib, you mentioned before your YouTube channel. Aside from that, do you want to tell where people can find you online?
Yeah, follow me on the Twitter at the Triple S League, and then also on all of the extra sites that are not, the alt, what are they calling it now? Alt media or whatever it's called. It's like the BitChute, the Rumbles, those kinds of places. We've got a presence on most of those places for our main shows and podcasts and stuff. So
right on, and there'll be links to that in the description box. And for my personal channel, you can find that down below, and you can just find me on all the other various forms of social media, just at Max Darrett. That's it, guys. Until we do this again next week, just want to remind you, as per usual, stay yellow.